so for number 13, remember that you can't have the radical in the denominator here. Okay, so we're going to multiply by radical 2, numerator and denominator. And that's going to give you radical 2 over 2. So what we really have here is the cosine of theta equals radical 2 over 2. Okay, so hopefully you see that that's a 45-degree angle as your reference angle. And we have, let me just get my pointer going, a positive value. So if we have a positive value, we look for where the cosine is positive. Okay, and that's going to be in the first quadrant and the fourth quadrant. So I know I have a first quadrant answer and I have a fourth quadrant answer. Well, in the first quadrant, your answer is just going to be your reference angle. And then in the fourth quadrant, remember, if we start here, we go all the way around to the fourth quadrant. Remember, the rule here is 360 minus. Okay. So 360 minus minus 45 rather is 315. So then we know that this angle here is 315 degrees. Okay, now we want this in radian form, so we know that that's pi over 4. And then we just ask ourselves, what do you multiply 45 by to get to 315? And that's 7 pi over 4. So here are your two answers. Now, another way that you can find that this is 7 pi over 4, and I know Miss Denise taught this, is in the first quadrant we have 45 degrees, right? And that would be pi over 4. In the second quadrant, what you're going to do is, this is technically, let me do this in red. This is a 1, right? Okay. So then in the second quadrant, this is going to be 3 pi over 4. Okay. And then in the third quadrant, this will be 5 pi over 4. You notice I'm counting by odds, right? And then this one will be 7 pi over 4. So it goes 1, 3, 5, 7. So if your angle is in the fourth quadrant and its reference angle is 45, then you know that's going to be 7 pi over 4, because in the fourth quadrant it would be 7 pi over 4. Okay, that's another way of looking at it. Okay, make sure you're taking notes in your packet when you do these questions. So I'm now looking at number 14 in your packet. Okay, so I'm going to start by subtracting over the radical 3, because I'm trying to get that cosine by itself, just like an equation. So then I would get 2 cosine theta equals negative radical 3. Now I'm trying to get that cosine theta by itself, so I'm going to divide out that 2. So then I have cosine theta equals negative radical 3 over 2. Okay, now, we do have this negative here, right? I want you to just ignore it for a second and just ask yourself, what angle has a cosine that's radical 3 over 2? Okay, just like usual, just ignore the negative. So if you do that, you should get 60 degrees, right? Okay, because the cosine of 60 is radical 3 over 2. Now here's where the negative comes into play. Remember before we had done all students take calculus. Well, we're still doing the same thing. But in this case, our cosine is a negative value. So we're looking for where cosine is a negative value up here. So cosine is negative here, and cosine is negative here, because these are the quadrants where cosine is positive. So these are the quadrants where cosine is negative. So we're going to be looking at the second and the third quadrant. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to write second quadrant, and I'm going to write third quadrant. And I want to find those angle measures. Well, remember in the second quadrant, the rule is 180 minus theta. So we're going to do 180 minus 60, which is 120 degrees. Okay, and then in the third quadrant, remember, if we're looking for the actual angle, we do 180 plus the reference angle. So 180 plus 60, which is 240. Okay, so these two answers right here are our answers, but we have to put them into radians. So let me just go back a step here. I'm going to put it in red so you can see it. Okay, remember, this is not an answer, but this was the reference angle. Remember that this would be pi over 3, right? So then just ask yourself, what do I multiply 60 by to get to 120? That would be a 2, right? So we know that 120 is a multiple of 60, and since I'm multiplying by a 2 here, I just took a 2 there. So let's do that again. So again, I know that this is going to be some multiple of pi over 3, and I ask myself, what do I multiply 60 by to get to 240? And hopefully you'll think, oh, that's 4. So then I just put a 4 there. And here are my two answers. All right, last question. Now, when you look at this, I want you to think of it kind of like as if this equation said 5x plus 1 equals 3x. That's kind of what it's like. Okay, these signs really are just like x's. So I'm going to try to get them together, and I'm going to move the 1 over to the other side. So I'm going to move the smaller sine x over. And that's going to give me 2 sine x plus 1 equals 0. And now let me move the 1 over. So that's going to give me 2 sine x equals negative 1. And let's divide out the 2. Okay, so I have sine of x equals negative 1/2. Okay, so again, let's just ignore the negative, and we're looking for an angle whose sine is 1/2, which is 30 degrees. All right, now, let me just write this real quick, and then I'll explain. So, this negative is just telling you what quadrants you're in. So you're looking for where the sine is a negative value, and sine is a negative value in the third and the fourth quadrant. So my answers will be in the third and the fourth quadrant. Okay, well, we know 30 is pi over 6. So in the third quadrant, remember it's 180 plus your reference angle, which would be 210. And then in the fourth quadrant, it's 360 minus your reference angle, which would be 330, right? Okay, so both of these are going to be some multiple of pi over 6. So then just ask yourself, what do I multiply 30 by to get to 210? And the answer to that would be a 7. So put a 7 here. And then ask yourself, what do I multiply 30 by to get to 330? And that would be 11. So we just put an 11 there. And there's your two answers.